Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Emily Schrader, and coming up in today's newscast. Hamas leader Marwan Issa eliminated in a major success as the Gaza war continues. Israel's Foreign Minister Israel Katz addresses the UN on Hamas's use of sexual violence on October 7th. Israeli security thwarts a major attack targeting Tel Aviv. Day 158 of the war against Hamas and the IDF is moving steadily towards victory in Gaza. That is the word from Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. In an apparent reference to the reported killing of Hamas Chief of Staff Marwan Issa, Gallant said there have been successes, including in recent days, and there will be more successes. The operations are persistent and headed in the right direction. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
Day 158 of the war in Gaza, with optimism sounded after the reported killing of Hamas Chief of Staff Marwan Issa. Beginning his remarks in Arabic, Defense Minister Gallant began with a traditional greeting for the Ramadan. Then came a warning from the Defense Minister.
חודש רמדאן הוא חודש חשוב, שבו ירד הקוראן ובו ישנה הזדמנות לשיפור יחסי השכנות ולחיזוק קשרי המשפחה. אנחנו מודעים לכך שחודש רמדאן עלול להיות חודש של ג'יהאד. אנחנו אומרים לכל מי שחושב לנסות אותנו, אנחנו מוכנים, אל תעשו טעויות. אני רוצה לברך אתכם ולהגיד לכולם, מדינת ישראל מכבדת את חופש הפולחן באל-אקצא ובכל המקומות הקדושים. רמדאן כרים.
In an apparent reference to the reported killing of Hamas Chief of Staff Marwan Issa, Gallant said there have been successes, including in recent days, and there will be more successes. The IDF spokesman also related to the reported killing of Issa.
אנחנו עדיין בוחנים את תוצאות התקיפה, וטרם התקבל אימות סופי לגביהן. ובכל זאת חשוב לעדכן, שבלילה שבין שבת לראשון, בפעולה משותפת של צה"ל ושב"כ, תקפו מטוסי קרב מתחם תת-קרקעי של בכירי חמאס במרכז רצועת עזה במרחב נוצירת. המתחם שימש שניים מבכירי הארגון. מרואן איסה, שהוא סגנו של מוחמד דף ואחד ממתכנני הטבח ב-7 באוקטובר, מרואן איסה הוא חלק ממשולש הטרור המרכזי ברצועת עזה, שמורכב גם ממוחמד דף ויחיא סינואר.
Meanwhile, on the ground in Gaza, the Egoz commando unit is continuing to search for fighters and weapons at the Hamad Town residential complex in southern Gaza's Khan Yunis, where the IDF says troops have killed dozens of Hamas gunmen in recent days. Commandos have captured several more Hamas operatives who surrendered to troops. In one engagement, soldiers came under fire while searching a building. The troops deployed a drone to locate the gunman and launched a shoulder-fired missile at an apartment where the gunman was hiding. He was killed immediately.
Hezbollah has fired some 100 rockets at northern Israel in one of its largest barrages since the start of the war in Gaza. There were no injuries or damage caused. The barrage came after IDF airstrikes deep into Lebanon caused considerable damage. More from ILTV's Devo Klein.
The first early morning barrage of some 70 rockets was accompanied by sirens in the Golan and northern Galil. This was followed by a second barrage of another 30 rockets, ending in a total of about 100, some of which were intercepted by the Iron Dome air defense system. Sirens did not sound for the second barrage as the rockets impacted in open areas. There are no reports of injuries or damage. The heavy rocket fire came after the Israel Defense Forces carried out strikes deep in Lebanon, saying fighter jets hit a pair of sites used by Hezbollah. The airstrikes in the area of northeast Lebanon's Baalbek targets facilities belonging to Hezbollah's aerial unit. Baalbek, an area identified in the past as a Hezbollah stronghold, is nearly 100 kilometers, or 60 miles, from the Israeli border. Lebanese officials said several people were killed in the Israeli strikes. Other strikes hit near the city of Ta'araya, 20 kilometers west of Baalbek. According to an IDF statement, the strikes targeted facilities belonging to Hezbollah's air defense unit and were in response to the Lebanese terror group's recent launching of explosives laying drones toward the Golan Heights.
Well, after dozens of rockets were fired at Israel from Hezbollah this morning, and Israel continues to battle Hamas in some of the last Gaza strongholds, we speak with the founder and president of Alma Research and Education Center, Sarit Zahavi, about what we can expect to see on the northern and southern fronts in the coming days. Sarit, thank you so much for being with us today. Can you speak a little about the most recent escalation with Hezbollah and what we can expect to see in the coming days and weeks? Will this expand to a full-on war? And if so, when?
Well, the prophecy is for the fools. I truly don't know. But I want to say a few things. First, we do see in the past few months kind of ups and downs, but in general, an average of 50 attacks coming from Hezbollah every week against the state of Israel. This is not new what is happening. This is happening all the time, every day in the past few months. The Northern Front was open in October 8. We had a gradual escalation of the amount of attacks, and it's kind of stabilized in the past few months. The changes that you see, more launching to distances which are more than 5 kilometers. Like yesterday, I myself lied on the ground with my little girl over here in the Western Galilee, a very unpleasant experience. You see more using of rockets rather than anti-tanks missiles. Are we going to have war? I don't think Israel is interested in war. I think Israel is interested in a diplomatic arrangement that way or another, and yet Israel is trying to achieve as many military achievements and success against Hezbollah until this will happen. It means trying to damage the capabilities of Hezbollah until this will happen. I'm not sure it will be enough to bring back the 60,000 people who were evacuated, but this is what the state of Israel is trying to do. What we don't know is what Iran is interested in, especially in light of Ramadan that just started, and in light of the fact that the leader of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, is refusing to negotiate any arrangement until there is a ceasefire in Gaza.
Now, moving south, Israel's efforts in Rafah have been under heavy international scrutiny due to the humanitarian situation. Will we see a full-scale invasion of Rafah? And how is Israel planning to avoid the civilian casualties with a terror group that actively plans the opposite?
First, that's the biggest challenge of this war. Rightfully, I understand that. I think that we must enter into Rafah. I'm not representing the Israeli government, so I don't know what the plans are, but I think we must do that, because there is no ending to this war without getting into Rafah and getting the Hamas leaders, and most important, getting the hostages. We have more than 100 hostages in Gaza in the tunnels now, and we are delaying our efforts, our military efforts in Gaza, because we're trying to find solutions to the humanitarian problems. And that's very sad, because meanwhile we have another humanitarian problem, which is our hostages, and we need to bring them back as soon as possible. What I see is that there is kind of collaboration between Israel and other states to try to, as you said, even though the efforts of Hamas to try to bring humanitarian aid to the Gazians, to try to find humanitarian corridors that will enable us either to evacuate or to create safe zones inside Rafah or outside of Rafah, and that way enable us to maneuver into Rafah. But this is something that must be done, and I believe that as we speak, somebody is working on the plan.
Now, there's been a lot of talk about Ramadan and the desire to have a ceasefire during this time. How much of an impact does Ramadan have on terrorism? Should we expect escalation, and what can be done?
Ramadan during the years was always an opportunity to inflame the region and to inflame the situation here in Israel. It's not the first time, except this time we don't know whether there is a specific order of the Iranian Ayatollahs to create another campaign against Israel and what they call unification of front campaign during Ramadan, what they didn't succeed in October 7th to try to escalate this now. If there is an Iranian decision. It doesn't really matter what the Israeli government or Israeli police would do.
Sareed, thank you so much for joining us today. We are out of time, but I want to thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple.
After President Biden's hot mic moment about having a come to Jesus talk, tensions between Israeli and U.S. leaders continues to rise as the U.S. administration attempts to play both sides in this conflict. ILTV's William Sharon has the latest.
Tensions between U.S. President Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu were on the rise after repeated comments by the U.S. president criticizing Netanyahu's execution of the war in Gaza. President Biden was recently caught on hot mic, in which he stated he and Prime Minister Netanyahu would have a come-to-Jesus meeting about the Gaza war.
Have you scheduled the come-to-Jesus meeting with Bibi Netanyahu?
No.
Do you plan to, sir?
We'll see what happens.
President Biden also recently hinted at addressing the Israeli people directly about Netanyahu's approach, but the White House stated that no plans had yet been made. While President Biden has reiterated his commitment to Israel in its time of need when it comes to security, he has also vacillated on the issue of destroying Hamas, repeatedly warning Israel not to conduct operations in Rafah.
It is a red line, but I'm never going to leave Israel. The defense of Israel is still critical, so there's no red line. I'm going to cut off all weapons so they don't have the Iron Dome to protect them. They don't have, but there's red lines that if he crosses, you cannot have 30,000 more Palestinians dead.
Prime Minister Netanyahu responded to Biden's recent comments by pointing out that the tensions between the two allies helps Hamas.
To the extent that Hamas believes that there's daylight between us, that doesn't help. I appreciated the support that President Biden and the administration have given us since the beginning of the war. I can only hope that it will continue to victory, because victory is at hand. Victory is close.
Despite the tensions, Prime Minister Netanyahu did emphasize the partial destruction of Hamas is simply not an option, and this is something mutually agreed upon with the United States.
The war is waging on the northern front and in Gaza, but not only there. Last night, security forces thwarted a major attack intended for Tel Aviv. ILTV's Devo Klein has the latest.
On Monday night, the Israeli security forces announced that they had eliminated a Palestinian terrorist who was planning an imminent suicide bombing attack on Israeli civilians. Israeli forces from the Duvdevan unit, together with the Shin Bet, conducted the operation in the village of Zeta, close to Jenin, which has become a major terrorist stronghold. The would-be suicide bomber was identified as Muhammad Jabbar, a 34-year-old Palestinian who initially drew a weapon when IDF forces confronted him in a grocery store. He was immediately neutralized. According to Israeli intelligence, Jabbar was planning to illegally enter Israeli territory with firearms and explosives with the intent to attack Tel Aviv. Since the beginning of the year, over 250 imminent terror attacks have been thwarted by the IDF and the Shin Bet. With the start of Ramadan, Israeli security forces are on high alert as Hamas has called for terrorism in Jerusalem and other Israeli cities.
As the United Nations Security Council met to discuss findings on the Hamas sexual violence report authored by Special UN Envoy Pramila Patten. Patten told the Security Council there was clear and convincing information that sexual violence, including rape and sexual torture, have been committed against hostages, and that such violence may still be ongoing against those in captivity. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
Pramila Patten reported to the Security Council after her team traveled to Israel and gathered, analyzed, and verified information on sexual violence linked to the October 7th attacks. There was no ambiguity in the findings.
In terms of findings on sexual violence, we found clear and convincing information that sexual violence, including rape, sexualized torture, and cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, have been committed against hostages, and we have reasonable grounds to believe that such violence may still be ongoing against those in captivity.
Patton told the UN there are grounds to believe that conflict-related sexual violence, including rape and gang rape, occurred in at least 3 locations.
With regard to the 7th of October attacks, we found that there are reasonable grounds to believe that conflict-related sexual violence, including rape and gang rape, occurred in at least 3 locations, namely the Nova Music Festival site and its surroundings, Road 232, and Kibbutz Reim. In most of these incidents, victims were first subjected to rape, then killed.
Foreign Minister Katz told the world body that nations must unite against Hamas and demand the release of the hostages.
Hamas is not speaking on behalf of the Muslim world, and we are asking you to condemn the sexual violence crimes these barbarians committed in the name of the Muslim religion. I'm demanding from the Security Council of the United Nations to put as much pressure as possible on the Hamas organization to release immediately and unconditionally all kidnapped hostages.
The U.S. ambassador challenged the Security Council to take action.
There can be no doubt about what happened on October 7th. The evidence before us is damning and devastating. Now the only question is, how will we respond? Will this council finally condemn Hamas's sexual violence, or will we continue to stay silent?
Well, as the UN discusses the new report detailing the sexual violence used against Israeli women, many are wondering why it took over 150 days to acknowledge that in the first place. Indeed, the UN certainly has a spotty record when it comes to Israel, and perhaps no one knows that better than the current ambassador to Germany and the former ambassador to the UN himself. Please welcome Ron Prosor. Ron, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we saw yesterday Foreign Minister Katz call on the UN to take decisive action against Hamas in the Security Council. What's the likelihood we'll see any action in the UN to investigate or uniformly condemn Hamas?
So let's start with something which is absolutely mind-boggling. The fact that Hamas is not seen and not designated as a terrorist organization by the United Nations. I mean, what do you have to do? I mean, commit massacre in broad daylight, burn people alive, and kidnap children and women, for you still not to be designated as a terrorist organization? This is absolutely unheard of. And I hope that now that it is in the Security Council, the UN would move and do something positive in this direction. Although I have to tell you, I'm very, very skeptical. And I myself, with all my experience, am really shocked that UN Women and other UN organizations treat the nation state of the Jewish people this way.
Now, the UN did release this report on the use of rape as a method of war, confirming what Israelis have been reporting from October 7th. Why did it take 150 days? And what do you expect the UN to actually do about it beyond the report? I know you mentioned very little in the first question. What can they do?
Well, first and foremost, it shouldn't take 150 days. They should be there, spot on. And because at the end of the day, this is exactly what they're paid to do, what the United Nations should be doing. And what do I expect? I expect the UN to really go down and look and find out the truth. Everything that, we experience and we've shown evidence, and this has to be in the public domain. The UN, under Guterres, and I've seen, some Secretary Generals during my time, is really eroding the position of the UN. If you look at it, is the UN relevant in different conflict zones? Is it relevant in doing something on Iran nuclear weapons program? The answer is no. Is it relevant in doing anything in North Korea? Absolutely no. Is it relevant in anything that has to do with Russia, Ukraine? The answer is no. And why is it? because they are on merit not able to do stuff which is not politically completely biased. There's a structural and institutional bias against the state of Israel that unfortunately, after the massacre of 7th of October, really comes out in a way that I, who know really the details of how this organization, works, the hydraulic and the mechanics, I am shocked.
Now, the UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese, along with several UN employees, have tried to distract from these attacks on October 7th by throwing a lot of baseless claims at the IDF, even allegations of sexual violence by the IDF, while at the same time casting doubt on the reports of rape by Hamas. Now, what should the UN be doing with officials like this? You mentioned it's inherently biased. In a way, they enable dictatorships. What can they do to repair credibility?
So this is exactly this. This is demonizing and delegitimizing the state of Israel without evidence. We should go after them. We should really go personally after them, name and shame them, so everyone will know exactly their bias. We cannot leave it, as generalities. We should go after them. We should push to really make them show evidence of what they're saying, and if not, call for their resignation. They cannot really represent anything with claims like that.
Now, generally speaking, is there anything the UN can do to help combat Hamas and other terror organizations that are specifically funded by the Islamic Republic? In short, what aren't they doing that they should be doing?
Well, let's start with something we began the show with. They should designate Hamas as a terrorist organization. What the United States, the United Kingdom, Europe, Australia. Come on, do the first things first. I mean, it's obvious that Hamas should be designated as a terrorist organization, and then everything leads from that. Then we can show the connection between, UNRWA and what they're doing, and we can show how UNRWA schools and hospitals and, mosques, what they've really done with this. And this, the minute you designate Hamas as a terrorist organization, you have the tools and a different toolbox to be able to act in an operational way. And there's no other way to describe it. The UN has to really go back to basics and do something which is not biased, so that this organization could claim some of the positive things that it did during its establishment after the Second World War.
Ambassador Ron Prosor, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
As Israel battles Hezbollah and Hamas, both proxies of the Islamic Republic, the US and UK are facing off against yet another terrorist proxy of the regime, the Houthis. The Houthis continue to disrupt international shipping routes in the Red Sea, targeting international vessels, including this week. ILTV's Ariella Lahiani has the latest.
Iranian regime-backed terror proxy, the Houthis, continued their campaign of attacking ships in the Red Sea in what they call solidarity with the Palestinians. Houthi spokesman Yahya Sareh claimed that the US ship Pinocchio was struck by Houthis missiles last night and noted that the terror group intends to step up attacks for Ramadan.
وتؤكد القوات المسلحة اليمنية أن عملياتها العسكرية سوف تتصاعد بعون الله تعالى خلال شهر رمضان شهر الجهاد نصرة ودعما وإسنادا للشعب الفلسطيني المظلوم ولإخواننا المجاهدين في قطاع غزة.
CENTCOM did confirm that 2 anti-ship ballistic missiles were fired at the Pinocchio by the Houthis in the Red Sea, but according to the US, there were no injuries and the ship was not struck. The US also noted that the ship was Liberian flagged, not American. The Houthis have been attacking international ships in the Red Sea to disrupt international shipping routes in what they call solidarity with the Palestinians since November. The US and UK have responded with force, striking Houthi targets including on Monday in several port cities of Yemen, but the Houthis' attacks have not yet been deterred.
Let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected tonight around the country, with temperatures sitting at lows of 13 degrees Celsius or 57 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, partly cloudy skies are expected alongside rising temperatures, set to reach highs of 24 degrees Celsius or 76 degrees Fahrenheit. That's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our ILTV channels, subscribe to our ILTV newsletter, and don't forget to check out our new and improved website, ILTV.tv, with all the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.